Welcome to the Moon Manifesting Podcast. I'm Kyra Howearth, your host. Here on the show, we talk all about manifesting your dreams with the power of the moon so you can use the cosmic energy to transform your life. Welcome back to the Moon Manifesting Podcast. My name's Kyra Howearth. And if you're here on the Moon Manifesting Podcast, chances are you're not a stranger to moon manifesting. You've probably been working with the moon cycle for a while, setting your intentions on the new moon, releasing what no longer serves you on the full moon. Maybe you've done some new moon rituals, some full moon rituals, and things in between. But maybe it feels like something's missing. Like maybe you're just brushing the surface of something that goes much deeper. What if I told you that there's an ancient yogic map that aligns perfectly with the 8 phases of the moon? A map that shows you not just what to do, but how to be. Body, breath, mind, and soul in each phase of the lunar cycle. Most of us approach manifestation like a checklist. Set the goal, take aligned action, burn that bit of paper on the full moon. But manifestation is not just about the outcome. It's not just about what you're actually going to receive at the end of that manifestation journey. Because that's what it is. It's a journey. And it can be more like a spiritual path. And if we're not aligning our energy along that journey, it's not just about setting your intentions, but it's about that whole journey, then it's possible that we're just not going to manifest what we want. So this is where the 8 limbs of yoga come in. This is our yogic map that I'm talking about today. This ancient philosophy of the 8 limbs of yoga isn't just about downward facing dog or meditation. It is a full roadmap for living in harmony with your inner and outer world. And in today's episode, I'm going to be pairing the 8 limbs of yoga with the 8 phases of the moon to help you unlock a rhythm that makes manifestation not just easier, but inevitable. If you don't already know, the 8 limbs of yoga stems from Raja Yoga, which is royal yoga. And the 8 limbs of yoga can be traced back to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which have been around for thousands of years. And this is our basic roadmap as yogis that we do focus on. And like I said, it's not just about the asanas, it's not just about the poses. There is just so much more to yoga that we can uncover. And the 8 limbs of yoga really is our map to exploring that. I'm going to go right into these 8 limbs of yoga today and how they pair up with the moon. But before I get into that, let me share with you a personal story. So I remember one lunar cycle in particular where I was really forcing things to happen in my business. I was doing all of the things. I was launching, I was in planning mode. I was really pushing for things to happen. But energetically, I was beginning to feel so exhausted. I was juggling so much, as I tend to do, homeschooling my kids, running my own business, and plus I teach yoga and Pilates locally. And I was just really feeling it all. So it was during a waning crescent moon, and I was like, you know what? I just need some time out for me. I rolled out my yoga mat at home and I sat down on my mat for an hour of yin yoga. And as I surrendered onto the mat, I found so much clarity. As I was able to let go of everything, I realized just how much I had been skipping the subtle inner work that is really required for manifestation. It's not just about all that outer work or the action taking, the pushing, the launching, even the planning. While all these things are super important, there is so much that needs to go on behind the scenes for manifestation as well. And so as I lay there on the yoga mat and as I was surrendering and going deep within, I realized how the 8 limbs of yoga can really mirror the 8 phases of the moon in a beautiful sort of synchronistic way. And I feel like this linking of the 8 phases of the moon to the 8 limbs of yoga really gave me a new understanding of how to work with the 8 phases of the moon, but also how to really work those 8 limbs of yoga into my daily life and how to work with each of these 8 limbs on a more regular basis. Because let's face it, in the Western world, if we are practicing yoga, a lot of the time we're maybe just going to yoga class, we're just rolling out our mat, we're focusing mainly on the asanas, and maybe that's where we leave it. Maybe we try to meditate at the end in Shavasana, maybe the teacher guides us through a bit of pranayama, but that's maybe as far as we get. But there is really so much more to yoga, and there is really so much more to moon manifesting. So let's dive into how the 8 limbs of yoga corresponds to the 8 moon phases. Now, before we dive into this section, I'd just like to just make like a bit of a disclaimer or a bit of a note. I'm not necessarily saying here that for each of these moon phases that you practice that specific limb of yoga that's connected to that moon phase. Yes, that can be a nice way to do this, but at the same time, it's just more about linking the energy. So I'm going to be talking about the new moon to start with, and I'm going to be talking about the energy of the new moon and how it's similar to the limb of yoga that I'm going to introduce next. So just bear that in mind, that I'm not necessarily saying that this is how you should practice yoga. There's definitely room for all 8 limbs of yoga in all of the moon phases. So yeah, you can kind of pick and choose, but just understand that this is more about the energetics and how things link energetically. All right, let's dive into it. So let's start off with the new moon phase. Okay, so the new moon is a time for setting intentions. It's a time for planting seeds, for establishing roots. So we can link this to the first limb of yoga, which is yamas. And yamas are like our ethical foundations. Yamas are kind of like the don'ts of yoga, right? So we have ahimsa, which is non-violence. So it's like, do not hurt other people, do no harm. We have asteya, which is non-stealing. So obviously we don't want to take what's not ours. So as we think about the new moon energy, about that planting seeds, about the establishing of roots, we can also liken this to the yamas of establishing our ethical foundations, establishing our ethical roots. And so it's during this time of the new moon that we might even like to reflect on how our actions affect others, how these ethical foundations that we're laying down, how they may affect us as we move through our manifesting journey, how our ethical foundations are going to affect others as we move through our journey, and also thinking about your intentions. Like, do they align with those ethical foundations that you're setting? Do they align with your values? Are they going to cause harm to anyone else? Is it going to, is it coming from a place of greed? One of our yamas is about non-greed. So we want to make sure that our new moon intentions are really aligned with our ethical foundations, with our values, with our yamas. So that might be something that you consider on a new moon. But again, you can consider this at any time. So as we move through the 8 phases of the moon, we're coming into our next phase. We're coming to the waxing crescent phase. This happens just after the new moon. It's that week between the new moon to the first quarter moon. This is a time of gentle growth. Generally, this might be a time of planning and preparing. And this might also be a good time to consider personal habits or practices that might help support you on your journey towards your goals. This is where the second limb of yoga can come into play, which is niyamas. So our yamas are like our don'ts of yoga, whereas our niyamas are like our do's of yoga. Niyamas are like our personal practices or our habits that we cultivate as yogis. These are the things that we strive to do on our path as a yogi. So the niyamas, one of the niyamas is tapas, which is self-discipline, but this can also mean heat. So by practicing tapas, we might create a daily habit that's going to support us on our journey towards manifesting our goals. And we're using that tapas, that self-discipline, to make sure that we're showing up every single day to do that habit, to do that daily practice, whatever it is that's going to help us along the journey towards manifesting our goals. You might like to practice contentment, which is santosha. By practicing contentment, you might just start to feel grateful for what you already have. When we're grateful for what we already have, it sends a clear message to the universe that we want more of this. So if we're wanting to manifest something, start feeling grateful for how that thing is actually already present in your life. So that's contentment. That's how we can use niyamas as part of our manifestation practice, linking that with the waxing crescent phase. So during the waxing crescent phase, you might start to think, what inner practices can help me to grow? What daily habits or personal practices can help me on my journey towards manifesting my goal? So you might even start a daily ritual or habit on that waxing crescent phase as you start getting closer towards manifesting your goal. We then come to the first quarter moon phase. The first quarter, I always like to say, is a time for taking action. It's where we switch from that planning and preparing mode of the waxing crescent into the more action-taking mode of the first quarter and beyond. So we can link the first quarter phase with the third limb of yoga, which is asana. This is our physical practice. It's our poses. It's our posture. So as you can appreciate, asana is definitely one of the more physical sides of yoga. It's definitely one of the most physical practices of the 8 limbs of yoga. And it's through this physical practice of asana practice that we are literally taking action. We are physically taking action with our body. The really cool thing about asana practice, and this is why I love yoga so much, why I have been practicing yoga for so long, and why I'm now a yoga teacher as well, is because it really helps to create shifts within the body. Our asana practice can help shift our energy as we release any energetic blockages that might be held within the body in certain areas. It can really help create those inner shifts that have a flow-on effect to our external world. So by bringing in this asana practice during the first quarter phase, we can help to shift any energetic blockages that might be holding us back. We can also start to build our strength, our physical strength through our physical practice, but also this can help build our inner strength, because what we do on the mat has a flow-on effect to how we approach life off the mat. So if you feel strong on your mat, maybe through doing quite a few chaturangas and downward dogs and all that sort of thing, well, once you get off the mat, you're going to be like, oh, you know what? I'm strong. I can do this hard thing. So there's that link between the first quarter moon and the third limb of yoga, asana practice. During the first quarter phase, you might like to actually roll out your mat and do some sort of asana practice. This is a really good time for doing like a energetic sort of flow, like a vinyasa flow or something like that, that's going to build heat, it's going to build movement, it's going to help shift those energetic blocks, and it's going to help you feel strong. So as we keep going through this system of the 8 moon phases and the 8 limbs of yoga, we come to our 4th moon phase, which is the waxing gibbous. This is a time from the first quarter moon through to the full moon, and we can link the waxing gibbous, which is a time of growth, with the 4th limb of yoga, which is pranayama. So pranayama, you might recognize part of this word yama. We talked about yamas back at the new moon phase, the first limb of yoga, yamas. So yama, I was saying, is like don't. Yama can also mean restraint or control. So when we're saying pranayama, we're talking about the control of prana. So what is prana? Prana has 2 meanings, and it's interchangeable. It can mean the breath, and it can also mean the energy. So in lots of languages, apart from English, the word for breath and energy, or breath and spirit, is actually the same word. So like in Chinese, we have qi, which is breath as well as energy. So in yoga, or in our Indian heritage of yoga, we talk about prana. Prana is our energy, but it's also our breath. So when we're talking about pranayama, we're actually using the breath to help regulate our energy, to control our energy. And there are specific pranayama techniques that you can use depending on what you're needing to do with your energy. If you're needing to find more balance, we can practice Nadi Shodhana, which is alternate nostril breathing, where you breathe in through one nostril and then out through the other nostril, in through one nostril and then out through the other nostril. Or you can do like a more sort of heated pranayama practice like the Bhastrika breath, which builds heat. You can also have pranayama practices that create a more cooling effect within the body. So there's lots of ways that we can use the breath, we can use pranayama to help us build our energy, to balance our energy, to cool down our energy, to help us feel calm, whatever it is that we're needing. So pairing that with the waxing gibbous phase, we're looking at how can we control our energy? How can we like maybe build our energy during this time as the moon is growing brighter in the sky, as it gets closer towards that full moon phase? How can we start to maybe build up our energy? Or maybe like, are we pushing ourselves too hard here? Maybe we need to start to calm ourselves down a little. Maybe we're feeling too overstimulated. We need some more calming energy. And this is where pranayama can really help us as well. You may also consider during the waxing gibbous phase, like, are you leaking energy? If you're like really pushing hard towards your goals, but like you've got maybe heaps of different things going on, how can you maybe stop that energy leaking out and maybe refine your energy so you're focusing on your one main thing that you're wanting to manifest? So whether you practice pranayama on the waxing gibbous phase, or maybe you just find that connection between pranayama and the waxing gibbous, it's up to you. So then we come to the fifth moon phase and our fifth limb of yoga. So we're talking all about the full moon phase. This is the peak of the moon cycle, and it can be a very sort of external sort of energy where there is lots going on. The full moon can be quite a chaotic time where it can feel really busy. Often I find that my calendar is just so full on the full moon without me even consciously doing it, but I just end up with like so many appointments and things scheduled on the full moon, and I just feel so busy. And you might find that something similar happens to you as well. Even if you don't have things planned, you might find that just on the full moon that you're just really busy, you're really active, there's just so much to do on the full moon. So interestingly, the fifth limb of yoga is pratyahara, and this is the withdrawal of the senses. So as the full moon is really forcing us to look on the outside world, on what's happening externally, what we actually need to be doing here is step back from that external noise and draw our attention within. So that is what pratyahara is about. We observe what's going on in the outside world. We might listen to the sounds that are happening in the room, or even going further, like listening to sounds that are coming from outside the room. We start to bring our senses within, and then we bring our senses closer and closer until we bring our senses right within. And then instead of listening to all the things that are happening around us, we're still aware, but we're focusing more on maybe the sound of our breath coming gently in and out through the nose. Maybe we're listening to the subtle beating of the heart. Maybe we can listen to any sounds that are happening in the digestive system, the gurgling of the stomach, or anything else that might be happening. And it's as we turn our senses within during the full moon that we're actually able to have that inner work that I told you about in my personal story, that like sometimes we're missing that inner work. The full moon is actually a really good time for shadow work, for facing your fears, for doing that inner work. And this is why it's often said that full moons are a time of releasing. But sometimes you get to the full moon and you're like, well, what am I actually supposed to be releasing? This is a time where we actually really need to go within to really see, like, what is it that's actually holding us back? Why have we not manifested the thing that we really want? Maybe we have some sort of subconscious block, and we won't bring that to our conscious if it's still hidden. So we really need to go within. We really need to look within. This is why pratyahara can be such a powerful practice on the full moon, when yes, it can be really, really busy out in that outside world and the external world. But the more we look within, the more effective our manifestation practice will be. So we'll continue our journey through our 8 limbs of yoga and our 8 phases of the moon. So our next one, after the full moon, we come to the waning gibbous phase, which we can pair with the 6th limb of yoga, which is dharana. So the waning gibbous, we begin to refine, we begin to maybe make adjustments, edits, and we begin to maybe reflect on what's been working for us, and maybe what could be improved, what needs to be adjusted, what we need to change as we move forward. And as we start to kind of wind down our energy in that waning gibbous phase, we can bring our yogic practice to dharana, which is concentration. So dharana, so after we have gone through that fifth limb of yoga, the pratyahara, that withdrawal of the senses, we begin to still our mind a little bit more. All of these steps, all of these limbs of yoga, you might notice that it's actually all preparing us for meditation. And we're going to get to that. Dharana can be a form of meditation. Dharana is where we focus the mind on one single thing. And a really great way to practice dharana, one of my favorite ways to practice dharana, is to do a tritaka meditation. So tritaka is basically a candle or flame gazing meditation where you might light a candle in front of you, a candle right in front of you. I have a candle next to me today actually. And you might just actually start to focus on that flame, just gazing at that flame. And after a while, you can actually start to close your eyes, but you'll still focus on that flame. You'll still have the picture of the flame within your mind's eye. And if the mind starts to wander, if you start to lose that visual image of the flame, you'll open your eyes back up and focus your gaze on that flame again. And then maybe you'll get to the point where you can close your eyes and still have your third eye focused on the flame. So as we practice that dharana, that intense concentration, that intense focus on one singular thing, this also reminds us in our manifestation practice, like, are we feeling a bit scattered? Are we bringing our focus to too many different things? Are we actually focused on our one goal that we really want to manifest? So just like in the waxing gibbous phase where we were considering energy leaks, the waning gibbous phase works in a really similar way where we're just refining our attention, we're refining our focus so that we can focus on that one thing that really needs our concentration, that needs our focus right now. So moving on, we're moving into the last quarter moon phase, and we can link the last quarter phase with dhyana, which is meditation. So the last quarter phase, this is where we start to let go, where we maybe start to surrender. We review what's worked, what's manifested, what's happening, and we're able to release whatever's not working. So similar to that waning gibbous phase where we were considering what needs to be adjusted, what needs to change, what needs to be edited out. The last quarter moon is where we actually just let those things go, where we can release, just let it fall out to the side. So we're talking about dharana, that intense concentration with the waning gibbous phase. With that last quarter phase, we're just actually going to let those things go that we're not focusing on. We're just going to keep our focus on that one thing, keep our focus on the goal, let go of everything else, and then start to surrender. So dhyana meditation is a bit similar to dharana, but it's like a stream of consciousness where you're maybe not using the candle, but maybe you're sitting in stillness for meditation. And every time the mind starts to wander, you just come back to stillness. You come back to that inner stillness. You release any thoughts, anything that's going on within the mind. You just let it drift away. You just let it go, and you keep coming back to that stillness. And the last quarter phase, especially as we shift into the waning crescent phase, it's not so much about doing anymore. The last quarter phase, I really like to take that last quarter phase through to the new moon, that last week of the moon cycle. I really find this is an important time to take time off, to step back from your goal. You're not actively working on your goal anymore. You're stepping back, you're surrendering to the universe. You're letting the universe take over, surrendering to the fact that everything will happen in divine timing, that you don't actually need to keep doing things. It's safe for you to take a step back and to surrender. And so that's what we can practice with our dhyana practice, our meditation practice. You can simply be a witness and just observe without actively needing to change anything or do anything. You can simply be without doing. And then that brings us to our 8th limb of yoga and our 8th moon phase. So as we come towards the end of the moon cycle, we come into the waning crescent phase. So this is that time between the last quarter moon phase and the new moon phase. It is the end of the moon cycle. And we can connect this to the final limb of yoga, the 8th limb of yoga, which is samadhi, which is ultimately our destination as yogis, as we're like going through this ancient yogic roadmap. Samadhi is bliss, it's union, it's enlightenment. And as we work with that waning crescent energy of surrendering and letting go and resting, it's through this surrender that we can actually find that connection to our bliss, to our samadhi. And we can kind of just trust that everything will work out okay, that it's okay. Like we can be content with how things are, again, just being rather than doing. The cool thing about samadhi is that of all the 8 limbs of yoga, the first 7 are actually things that you can practice. But the 8th limb, samadhi, is actually not something you can practice. It's actually the result of doing all those other 7 limbs of yoga. And we can kind of think about the waning crescent phase in a similar way where, we've done all the work. We've, gone through all the other moon phases. And once we get to the waning crescent phase, we can just let go. We can just be. We can just let it all go. Just trust that whatever it is that we want to manifest will come through in divine timing. So there's our 8 limbs of yoga paired with the 8 moon phases. When you align the 8 phases with the 8 limbs of yoga, you're no longer just doing a moon ritual, you're actually living a spiritual path. And it becomes less about that outcome at the end of the journey, but it becomes more about the journey along the way. And you can begin to realize that, there's times to take action, but there's also times to rest. There's times to reflect. And there's times that you can also just let go and surrender. And your yoga practice can really blend in well with these 8 phases of the moon. Like I said earlier, you don't have to necessarily practice those 8 limbs in alignment with those 8 phases. Instead, you might even like to think or just tune into yourself each day or each week. Like, which of the 8 limbs of yoga would I like to focus on at the moment? Which of the 8 limbs of yoga would support me in my moon manifesting journey? And you can absolutely use that as a guide to go a bit deeper into your moon manifesting journey. Rather than just kind of scratching the surface, you can really make your moon manifesting journey more of a spiritual journey. So if this episode really sparks something in you, if you're ready to go deeper into these yogic rhythms, as well as aligning your energy with the cosmos, but more specifically, learning more about yoga, then I would really love to invite you to join my 50-hour Yin Yoga teacher training. We'll be exploring the energetics of yin yoga poses, and it is really more of a like a rest and reflecting style of yoga rather than a more active style of yoga. It's yin yoga, so it is a really sort of gentle practice, but there is still so much that yin yoga can offer us. What's really unique about my 50-hour yin yoga teacher training is that I do cover astrology and how astrology links in to yoga, specifically yin yoga. And I don't think this is covered anywhere else in the world. I think this is absolutely unique to my training. So if you would love to learn more about yin yoga, whether you want to go on to become a yin yoga teacher or you just want to use this information for your own personal practice, or weave it into your existing modalities or skills, you'll find the link in my show notes below, or you can go through to kyrahowearth.com/yin, YIN. So just like we begin with that sense of something missing from your moon practice, I hope you now feel like you've found a thread to weave deeper meaning into your manifestations, and that you're realizing that moon manifesting isn't just about what you want to manifest. It's not just about that goal at the end of the road, but it is a full journey, and that we need to honor each step of the journey along the way, and that you can't just kind of like pick and choose. You can't just do all the action taking and not take out time for rest. You can't just do the asana practice without, also sitting back for meditation. So I hope that this has been really inspiring. And I'd love to leave you with one of our Yoga Sutras from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. This one comes from Book 3, Sutra 28, and it is one of my favorites. It's the English translation, or one of the translations is, by Samyama on the moon, one gains knowledge of the arrangement of the stars. So in other words, when we meditate deeply on the moon, we begin to understand our place in the greater cosmic pattern. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Moon Manifesting podcast today. If you would like to share any insights that came up, feel free to comment below if there is the function to comment depending on where you're listening to today. Otherwise, feel free to send me a message on Instagram or Facebook. You'll find me at kyrahowearth.official. And for now, stay tuned, stay manifesting, and stay magical. I will speak with you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Moon Manifesting podcast. If you are curious about working with the moon, you can read my book, Moon Manifesting, or join us inside the Moon Manifesting Coven. You'll find the links in the show notes, or go to kyrahowearth.com.